The last passenger. 3. I sat there in the dead silence, my hands gripping the seat, my breath shallow and rapid. The car had come to a stop, but I couldn't bring myself to open the door. Something felt off. The air outside was thick, suffocating, and it didn't feel like the world I knew. I turned to the driver, expecting him to speak, but his face remained frozen. He was no longer the same person I had entered the car with. His eyes were hollow, black as night, and his lips were twisted into a thin, mocking grin. He was no longer a man. He was a thing, a shadow of something far worse. Where are we? I managed to croak, but my voice felt distant, as if the words weren't even mine. The driver didn't answer. He simply stared ahead, unblinking, unmoving. I had to get out. I had to leave. My instincts screamed at me to flee, but my body wouldn't move. I tried to open the door, but it was as if it was locked from the outside. I pressed the button, yanked the handle, but nothing happened. The door wouldn't budge. My panic began to swell. I looked around. There was no one. No other cars. No buildings in sight except the abandoned structure looming in the distance. The fog was thick now, wrapping the world in an impenetrable blanket. I could feel my breath quickening. Sweat beaded on my forehead. My hands were trembling uncontrollably. Then the driver spoke again. His voice, a low rasp. "You are the last passenger." I blinked, unsure if I had heard him correctly. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. His grin stretched wider, and his eyes darkened even further. The shadows in the car seemed to deepen, swallowing the already dim interior. "You don't understand yet, do you?" he said, his voice now mocking. You've been here before, and so have I. This is the road that doesn't end. And once you are on it, there is no getting off." I stared at him, the weight of his words sinking like a heavy stone in my chest. I had been here before? But how? I couldn't remember anything like this. The road, the car, the feeling of being trapped, it was all too surreal, too wrong. "You are dead," the driver whispered, his voice barely audible above the growing roar in my ears. I froze, my mind scrambling to process what he had just said. Dead? I couldn't be dead. I was sitting here, heart racing, breathing. I was still alive. I shook my head. "That's not true. I'm not dead. I'm just lost, okay? I just want to go home." The driver didn't respond. He only smiled, his lips curling in a way that made my skin crawl. I glanced out the window again, but there was nothing but a thick, whirling fog, nothing to grasp into, nothing to break free. And then it hit me. The faintest sound, like the echo of a scream, came from the dark as outside. I turned my head sharply, eyes wide. The scream came again, louder this time. It was a human scream, a cry for help. I gasped, my blood running cold. It wasn't coming from anywhere near the car, but from somewhere beyond it, somewhere distant. I tried to scream, but my voice caught in my throat. I tried to open the door, but this time I heard it. A soft click. The door opened. I bolted out of the car and stumbled into the fog. My leg felt like dead as I ran towards the sound of the scream, the only sign of life I could latch onto. But no matter how fast I ran, the scream only seemed to grow more distant. I couldn't stop. I couldn't look back. My mind was spinning. A maelstrom of fear and confusion. I didn't know what was happening, but I had to get away. I had to escape whatever this was. And that was when I saw it. A figure, tall and thin, standing in the fog, just outside the edge of the car's headlights. It was me. I stopped dead in my tracks. The figure's face was gaunt, pale, with hollow eyes staring back at me. I couldn't move. My feet were frozen to the ground. The figure raised its hands, as if beckoning me forward, but there was no way I could go any closer. That was when I realized the last passenger wasn't me. It was the driver, the man who had been driving me all along, the man who had never existed. He was part of this place, trapped in this endless loop of despair, but like everyone else who had ever ridden this road. And now it was my turn.